Morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Nussbaumer. I help run sales and marketing here at Abacus, and I'm going to be the moderator for the next panel. And we're going to be covering AI and ML applications in the enterprise. So in my role, I'm fortunate to get to know a lot of AI and ML leaders, and I'm super excited and grateful that we have three of them here today. So we have Meenal Iyer from Momentive.ai, Sumesh Kumar from Twilio, and also Vikram Jayaram from Pioneer. I'm going to start the session with a quick introduction from each panelist, and then we have some prepared questions that we'll go through. But in the audience, if you have any questions you'd like answered, please go ahead and post those in the Q&A section. Sometimes the chat moves quickly and it's hard to catch them, but in the Q&A section, we'll see those and we'll try to answer them if we can. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? So Meenal, would you mind kicking things off with a brief introduction of yourself, your background, and a little bit about Momentive.ai?
Sure, thank you. After that very interesting session with Noah, I think we are going to get down finally to grassroots. But I'm Meenal. I head data here at Momentive.ai, and I have been in this field for about 23 years now and worked across various industries. So for me, this is the first experience for me with SaaS. And I'm learning a lot as part of that in terms of just purely new business and the data itself. I'm very excited to be on this panel and see how organizations such as, other organizations such as Twilio and Pioneer also handle basically data and AI and ML on their side, and, what I could take from this whole conversation. So glad to be here.
Great. Thank you so much. Sumesh, would you care to go next?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Sumesh Kumar. First of all, thank you, Patrick and Bindu, for having me for this wonderful panel discussion. So I am leading our go-to-market analytics here at Twilio. So my job is primarily working with our go-to-market organization, whether it's customer support, marketing, sales, and really providing insights on our customers and enabling them to drive more sales, whether it's upsell, cross-sell, and also reaching our customers with the right product and the right message.
Okay, thank you so much. And then Vikram?
Thank you for having me again, and pleasure to meet everyone here on the panel. My name is Vikram Jayaram. I lead the data science and innovation at Pioneer Natural Resources. We are an independent oil and gas company. I pretty much support all the corporate-wide data science, machine learning development all across our business units, which means real-time decision support systems for our command centers in operations. Machine learning, production forecasting is another area that I work very closely with our reservoir engineers, and then advanced geoscience and advanced reservoir scale simulation models and things like that are also part of my daily, job duties that I have. Some of the other things that we also work is the technology initiatives in ESG, especially methane sensors, aerial imaging, and things like that would record some of our emissions and all that, and how we control them. So I've been in this area for about 21 years now. I began my career in research and development in academia with 10 years at NASA, MD Anderson, and faculty positions at University of Oklahoma. And then I did have in an R&D side of the business wherein I co-founded one of the Bay Area companies back in the days, and then more recently worked, right before this job, I worked for the airline tech industry.
Great. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here. And so I was, in the prior session, someone posted a quote from someone and said, AI will not replace a person, but a person using AI will. And, when we talk to companies, the companies that are better at leveraging AI, are shown to outperform or outcompete others who are unable to leverage AI. And so there's a question in chat that ties into my first question for you all. So the question in the chat was, how does one keep up with the rising innovations and applications in AI? But I think the bigger question that this falls into is, a lot of companies we talk to have difficulty moving fast enough, whether it's with changing data, with changing market conditions, with changing innovations in AI. There's just all sorts of dynamics moving, and AI is complex enough. So what are some thoughts you have around how to move faster in terms of AI in your organization? And that's open for anyone. Who would like to kick us off?
I can start.
Okay.
So I think in order to improve the velocity, first we need to understand all the components of the pipeline itself. So it starts all the way from the business need, and we should have a very clear understanding of what that business needed and what the impact is going to be, so that whatever we build or produce as a product essentially is going to be immediately having impact and then of course adopted. So I think that is very, very key. So, if you want to improve the velocity, that's one very, very key component. The second, of course, is the quality of your data and then the governance surrounding that data itself. So that should be very clear. So again, it's a garbage in, out policy. So, if you don't put the right data in, then obviously, you're not going to get the right outcome out. So, making sure that that data is ready and available is something that is very, very key to the organization. And then, of course, you start building and understanding the rest of the components that you have and see how best you can begin to start automating those, and then building your pipeline end to end. And then, once you start putting that into production, then the feedback back into your model from where the business is actually seeing whether it was a success or a fail, we basically have that feedback go back into the model. And so that's another piece that needs to be kind of very clearly well defined and put in place. And I believe that if we do all of these and we kind of do it in the right order, then we have an ability and opportunity to actually improve the velocity of how we can push models out to production.
Okay, thank you. Sumesh or Vikram, did you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I can go next, Patrick. And I can relate to this from my personal experience, especially here at Twilio. So when I started in this particular role at Twilio, it was taking us 2 to 3 months to really, move a model into production. So after we adopted Abacus, and to echo what Meenal just mentioned, we invested a lot of time and effort in building this end-to-end pipeline, right? So whatever that is, basically all the way from data organization was really where we spent majority of our time. So we have a lot of first-party and third-party data, ingesting all of that data in, let's say, Abacus, building a central feature store, doing all the feature engineering. And what the benefit of doing that was, when we had to build models in the future, we didn't really have to start from scratch. We could just use the data that is already available, use AutoML. And a lot of times the AutoML features that are available in some of these industrial tools, AI tools, are they're very solid. And, we were happy with the results in the sense that we didn't really have to worry about model selection or hyperparameter tuning. And the lastly, I would also like to mention is deployment is also another challenge that we experienced. And having a native connection to something like a Salesforce, we could deploy our batch predictions directly into Salesforce with just a click of a button. And that really helped drive some of the velocity in terms of how quickly we were able to service our internal organizations and release new models into production and also test those models.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. And Vikram, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
So I think Meenal and Sumesh pretty much covered most of that those are concerns for us also, and the way we tackle it on a day-to-day basis. The one other thing that I would like to add is sustainability of the stack itself, and because that is where all the plumbing is, all your experimentation is. And if you don't put a good thought to what it should look like and survive at least the 2 years that you have, then it becomes extremely difficult to do your experimentation. So sustainability of your solution is one of those things that that we always make sure that we are picking up the right stack for what it is worth.
Okay, excellent. So couple of comments in response to that. So Meenal, you talked about some automation, and Suresh, you talked a little bit about AutoML, and then Vikram a little bit about sustainability. And when I was listening to Noah, he shared that example of the typist, right? The person who could type very, very quickly, wasn't a good use of his time. And many times when we get into conversations, we come across companies and say, oh, we're going to code everything. We want to code everything. But, and then on the other end, there's some people who say, oh, we're going to automate everything. And in reality, it's a hybrid approach. How does automation help augment your highly skilled and scarce data scientists? And how can they leverage automation better? Is there room for automation for a highly skilled coder in the space of data science? Suresh, do you want to kick us off on that? Or Vikram, I'm sorry.
No worries. So yeah, I could get started on that one. So in our case, we're probably slightly different here, is because whatever we build it for our own, members, personnel of our own company, and we are divided between us here in the headquarters, and then most of our operational folks are in the oil field. And so every now and then it's an automation project, which we probably are looking in for, trying to build machine learning models that whatever they do can somehow be automated in a space that will save time. As long as it is saving time, it's safe for them and all that, we do make it a point to kind of automate some of those processes that would have taken them weeks together, or probably a month or something, could be done within a few hours of the day. So that's one of the areas that we kind of primarily focus on, and trying to reduce that number of human hours so that we can deviate some of those hours into something more challenging that is involved in the field.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Suresh or Meenal, did you have anything you want to?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. So in our case, Patrick, automation is really not, our end goal or a focus area. It's really understanding what is the MVP that we are trying to build, right? So, and what is that end-to-end process looks like there might be multiple steps like A, B, C, D, and trying to really kind of define that. And initially based on our experience, what it's been is you might not really, hit it out of the park, in the sense that some of these might be manual steps, some of these might be, some band-aids that you would put in. But the key is to really having an holistic approach and building this end-to-end pipeline view. And over time, as you iterate, you definitely want to automate so that you can really kind of drive the velocity that we talked about. So it's really about understanding what is that your entire process looks like, mapping that process out in detail. And if you don't have it fully automated initially, it's fine. But over time, you get plenty of opportunities to really kind of drive efficiency and automation, whether it's data pipes or your AutoML, or whether it's deployment.
Sure. And do you think there's a need in that end-to-end process for some sort of if statement around, can AI help build this model for me, or do I need a human to build it, or something in between?
It really depends on the use case, Patrick. So for example, for our use cases, a lot of it is, AutoML, and the AI really kind of works for us. But for some banking use cases, when you're talking about fraud applications where 0.1% accuracy is meaningful, that's where maybe you want to have a mix of AutoML and maybe also a human intervention.
Sure, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would just like to add a little bit to that. So I see having automation essentially as an opportunity, right? So as we talk about data literacy across the organization, we have data scientists, and then we have citizen data scientists across the organization. And, obviously we are looking to see how we can make the organization more productive within the tools that we have. So, I think Sumesh very clearly outlined as to the benefits that we have with Abacus itself. And one of the things it lets us do also is allow for these data analysts or junior data scientists who are essentially getting into the field an opportunity to start experimenting out with things that they wanted to try out, but wouldn't have the resource in terms of a senior data scientist to start looking at. So I look at this as an opportunity not only to educate the broader organization, but bring them in and starting them to understand as to what the nuances of the whole process itself is. So I see it as a good benefit. I see where Sumesh is going with this as well. But yes, when it comes to the more accurate and the more critical models, you obviously have to have. There is going to be a component of AutoML, but for most part, you are going to build that out. But if you look across the org, I think there is more opportunity to get more people on the platform, and have things experimented out and trialed out much sooner with these capabilities.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and it reminds me of a story from a data science leader that I spoke with in Australia, and he said, "Look, I have a few unicorns who are they know the industry inside and out. They're just great data scientists, and I want to keep them focused on that 0.1% improvement that's critical to my business. I don't want them doing, the kind of simpler models, so to say. But I also have junior data scientists that I need to get productive quickly. They don't have the industry expertise, and how can I work with them?" And you kind of addressed that a little bit, where it's a balance of maybe the different types of approaches, use cases that an organization needs to manage when you think holistically. So thank you for that. So, in your first response, Meenal, you mentioned governance, and at Abacus we talk a lot about model and model monitoring. The concept is quite simple, but the reality of it is, if you have a business process has an AI model running it underneath, and something goes wrong, who has the authority to pull the plug? And have organizations done enough to outline, like, well, who actually can make the call? Who has the ability to roll it back when, if it's a business critical model, it could have very large dollar ramifications. Have any of you come across that or handled that in different ways?
We have had to pull the plug on a model when it stopped being of value. So, you have to continually look, and that's why the monitoring takes place, so that your metrics are performing to what it is. Nature of business changes, right? I'm sure people who had models in production pre-COVID, after COVID, they may have noticed that all of their models were no longer valid, specifically around customer and customer behavior. And yes, at that point, you have to pull the plug on the model. Ultimately, I believe that decision comes down from the business. We can provide guidance in terms of saying, this model is only now 60% accurate. And this is as much as it is going to provide, but it could potentially still provide value than zero to the business unit itself. So, it's finally upon them, but, we can fully provide the guidance in terms of saying that this is where it is at this point. So do you still want us to continue, or should we go back and do a retrain of the model? Do you believe there are other business parameters that we need to start looking at that haven't been considered as features, or is there business climate that is changing that we need to now look at and address? So according to me, I think, that's where kind of the onus lies. It's on the business unit essentially to make the determination in terms of whether a model should continue operating versus not.
When you move a model like that into production, does the business stakeholder know they have that responsibility, that you're going to come to them ahead of time?
Yes. So it falls under the whole governance principle. So, similar to how we do data governance, as to where the business owner of that metric essentially owns the metric definition. And if anything changes, it's their responsibility to publish and or communicate. Similarly, with the model itself, they kind of take ownership of the model. So that is defined. So when we define the business requirements in terms of success criteria, in terms of what the metrics are and what the success metrics are, at that point, it is very clearly understood as to who the business owner or the business unit is. There could be multiple business units profiting from it, but there is one single business owner or business unit that is held accountable and responsible for the model itself. So that person is the one who would make the decision in terms of what next steps to do for the model, whether it should still stay in play or whether it should be taken out.
Okay, thank you. Vikram, how have you handled that in your organization?
So, it's very similar to what Meenal has just mentioned. But what I would like to also mention is, and I'll take this with the help of an example. So years ago, I kind of worked on a problem called as robotic shopping. and which is, it's an unfortunate situation wherein you have certain people trying to create a cache for in the retail space. And what happens is that kind of puts you in a situation wherein they are trying to negotiate the pricing of any commodity, whether it's an airline ticket or something of that sort, and things like that. Now, when you put something, a model that can detect between organic shop, which is an actual shop that me and you or any people would do it, versus a robotic shop, there are some rules that you would put together. There's a model that you would put together that it'll actually try to predict between what kind of a shop this is. But every now and then, this is an industry wherein people keep on getting better at it and identifying that this is something that is catching us quite often, and they keep chasing that. So sometimes what happens is these kind of problems become a very cat and mouse kind of a game, all the time. And at that point of time, do you really want to take a decision as to how do you kind of rethink your strategy as in terms of what you're trying to do, instead of just playing that, that it's not a successful thing, because every time you try to make things change to your robotic fishing kind of algorithm, then they would change their patterns too pretty quickly. So it's not a worthy thing to kind of put a lot of people and a lot of effort in doing that, and you got to rethink your design and things, and what else could you be doing to change the business process.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. And then, to follow up on that, one of the questions from the audience is, what are the types of metrics used that the business user, that are assigned to the business users when thinking about pulling a model? Is it, the same metrics used for model monitoring, or is it, a different type of metric?
Yeah. So anytime there is a change in the choice behavior models, then you would, those are one of the things also. You would see certain patterns that would tell you this is a way wherein an organic shop is being done, and it's deviating from it all the time. And when it deviates from it, then you kind of put that as a metric to start making decisions as to what is to be done to kind of do that. And this is something we see in my current job role also, is when people come, the crew changes, they do something different. The kind of data that is flowing in is a little different, and then all of a sudden you've got to figure out, you talk to your stakeholders, and then you take your time to kind of recalibrate your models for it. Sure.
Okay, excellent. So the next question I wanted to ask is around large scale AI applications in production. So very large data or real-time applications. Are there any unique challenges you have to overcome when you start thinking about models for very large scale applications that you would like to share? Suresh, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think the biggest challenge that we've experienced when talking about large scale application is obviously the amount of data. So anytime you have large amount of data, that really kind of slows down your iterations, which I feel are, kind of very essential for innovation, where you're able to iterate through a model, whether it's with the user or some sort of an experimentation and trying to get better. But with the large data, it really, gives you longer training cycles, longer data aggregation, longer inferences, and longer everything. And that's really kind of what slows, at least in my experience, slows the, the whole model building exercise down.
And how do you address that? What are some different ways you can address that?
It's really about, and I think I spoke to that initially, which was, thinking about your MVP. So our primary approach to building models is we really don't, are not really thinking about building models, right? We think about building a system, which is really, putting the plumbing together, the infrastructure in place, having that the data layer in place, AutoML, connectivity to your edge applications, whether it's Salesforce, all of that investment in place so that Once you have that in place, then obviously, you don't really have to deal with large amount of data because all of that is already kind of available for you in your, in your applications to really start building the models that you need.
Sure. Okay.
Just something I would add to that is if you basically, like with large scale models also, because we have larger data sets, the complexity of the data itself increases. And, one of the ways that we have addressed it traditionally is to see how much of it, think about push down optimization. So when we do push down, is you push all the processing back into the database. So how much of that complexity of the data set can you resolve within the data set itself? So, if there are critical heavy joins or anything specific that you are doing, are those things essentially that you can address upfront itself, so that, when the data is fed into the model, it's in a much more cleaner and a much more, in a format that is more readily acceptable. So yes, there are the cycles that spin in terms of just pure training that we will have to do, because now we are addressing a larger data set, but there are ways in which you can actually tune your data set till before you can actually push it down. But yes, that is a continuing challenge, and we are always looking to see how best we can fix and or address it.
Sure. So really just optimizing each step of the system, whether it's where the work will be handled, even the structure, the types of compute you can select nowadays, you having a cluster or not. I mean, the options are amazing, but it also requires more knowledge of what are the different options you have in each step of the way, right? Excellent. So in the prior session, again, there were a lot of chat topics about, AI replacing people and automation or whatnot. And when you use AI in the business setting, trust is obviously very important. But how do you handle a conversation with, say, business users who are relying on AI to do their job? It changes their business process. They may be threatened by it, and they have to trust it. How do you handle those types of conversations? How do you get the adoption from people, either internal to your organization, or even if you have products that are externally facing, how do you get people to trust the AI and then look for that higher value purpose in their work?
Yeah, I could take that. So normally this is something that has been very near and dear to us here, because of the skill set of the people. There are jobs in the field that are manual and that needs a lot of intervention, a lot of physical work that is needed in what it is. In fact, in top of, sensors and all kinds of stuff being put in our drilling, completions, and operations type of operations. But more importantly, whenever you go with a use case, that this is how it is, and the response that you would get is, so is it going to take away my job? Because now you have figured out somehow to do this, and I've been doing this for 35 years. Mm-hmm. And so the way to kind of deal with that is to showcase that what would have taken them several hours to do that, and they are irreplaceable. Their knowledge is irreplaceable. We're not there to kind of judge that. But given that there is a certain tolerance that they can live with, and a model is able to produce something as anywhere between 85 to 90% of what they do, so that they can finish some of that other work much more faster, then that gives them a little bit of more of confidence. So we have done this wherein we have kind of handheld some of our people to showcase that operationally you have been doing the same amount of work by just utilizing some of these solutions, which would have taken you about a week's time or something, and now you could be doing it much more faster. And kind of utilizing that same time. Obviously, there also has to be buy-in with their managers and everyone else to how they could be utilizing that extra work that got created into something which they would want to do in the future. And I feel there has to be a plan for that first, as to what they would do in that extra time in some cases, before some of our models that you deploy and kind of help them in doing that. So it's not just saying you could do something else, but there has to be a plan for something to do.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's basically change management principles that you need to take into account when any system is implemented, whether it's a long time ago when you had just BI systems reporting or CRM applications. You have to think about the change and address that as you're rolling it out.
And Patrick, if I may add, so a lot of our models are driving human action, right? So basically they're used by a real person versus the model being embedded in a particular product. And that's why their trust is paramount. And one of the ways that we have, kind of generated trust with our end users is through driving a lot of transparency, right? So really in, opening the kind of the model and really explaining as to what is the what is the data that is being used and how the model predictions are, obviously in a more business fashion. So we work with our sales enablement organization to do a lot of documentation. We are leveraging Abacus to deliver inference explanation alongside the prediction. So for example, if you're reaching out to customer A, why the customer A is likely to buy product X are because of these XYZ reasons. And that resonates really well with our, the humans, which is the sales organization, and generating trust. And so that's one of the things that's really worked for us.
And then it's also in terms of just pure velocity. So if you can actually show or showcase essentially the fact that, it's going to improve their standard of work that they are actually doing on a daily basis, it reduces the manual effort significantly. So when it comes to sales organizations, there is a lot that they have to continually do. So if you have like 100 customers that you're following up as part of your job, then what can we minimize in terms of work that you are doing repeatedly? And it comes back again to the whole concept of automation. So what can we automate and what can we make better for you so that, you can do your job much more effectively. And in my experience, it has always been that as we have started pushing these products out, the end users have always been really happy because, there is a big chunk of work that traditionally they were just doing it because they had to, and they had no alternative. And, it was kind of lowering their productivity, and they were just happy that, these things essentially improved their productivity and they were actually able to do things that were much, much more meaningful. So, I think if you can again showcase, so to Vikram's point, you have to build a use case, showcase it to them that, yes, this is going to help change what's happening for you, and prove it, then you find a champion for life. And then, of course, you can use them to kind of propagate that to the rest of the organization as well. And drive progress and success in that way.
Excellent. And so when we talk about success, a slightly less practical discussion, but what I find to be a very interesting discussion is, most data science leaders that I talk to have a favorite either use case or application of AI, in your experience. Do any of you have a story you'd like to share of either a tremendous impact from AI or something that was unforeseen, either organizationally or the output that you find fascinating? And I'm happy to start off with a very simple one that I think it was AAA in New England was trying to forecast the number of tow trucks they needed to maintain their service level agreements, and they were struggling to get the number correctly, and they had a forecasting model, but it wasn't until they accounted for New England Patriot home games that the forecasting model was accurate enough and had a big impact. And I always find that very interesting how data science is so important to have that subject matter expertise as you're building the models, because it can really change the output significantly. So that's one of my favorite stories. But I'll turn it over to you. Do you have any favorite stories that you like to share about AI and enterprise?
Yeah, I could take one of that for sure. I think this example was actually in my experience in the airline industry, where we were supposed to kind of figure out that who is actually a business customer versus a leisure customer kind of a situation. And this is a complicated problem because this is not like wherein you can actually go into their profiles and things like that. You don't have any access to any of that stuff. This is a very you just look at standard travel patterns and the days they are going to depart, the days they're going to arrive from destination A, destination B, and then you're supposed to figure out which kind of customers they are. And so a lot of sophisticated models were put for this, and many of them failed, some of them succeeded and all that. But ultimately, what really made sense was it is the month when you're traveling. If the departure airport and the arrival airport had a temperature difference of certain X temperature, and the month in which you're traveling as a feature that you would put in, the accuracy just went up skyrocketing. And so again, this is when you look at features, you do not think what are the direct nuances that is out there, but there's sometimes these indirect nuances that come into picture, which you have to formulate, which will have a tremendous impact. Because again, the machine doesn't think like a human. The machine looks at the data and tries to find out correlations, and based on which it is trying to predict and give you what accuracy. So in fact, this was one of the very successful stories, and did have a tremendous impact on the models that were put in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I love it. Love stories like that. It's that to me is what makes data science fun, is that human element, that you're still working with the algorithms, with the compute, and you still need that human element to come up with new features and things. Suresh or Meenal, did you have any stories that you wanted to share?
Sure. So I was at a financial services organization early on in my career, and we actually set out to build. And this was something that my team kind of built by itself. It wasn't truly a business requirement, but we built it out, because we were looking at the data and we were trying to understand as to how the current process was, and we realized that there was optimization required in the process. So there was a fraud detection model that we actually built out, and that saw basically immense success. Essentially, the company was a company that had to detect, like, people could actually purchase those gift cards in bulk and basically do money laundering using that. And so using that, we were trying to detect fraud in terms of, how many people were actually purchasing those kind of gift cards and potentially going to use it for money laundering. And that was essentially the crux of what detection of fraud entailed for us. So we built the model very successfully, and instead of having 8 analysts, like financial analysts, whose job was just to understand and look for fraud specifically, so they had very crude and primitive, like, fraud-based rules. So beyond that, essentially, we were able to provide and say that a transaction needs to be flagged out for fraud, and that reduced the number of analysts that they required to sit in and do these tasks specifically from 8 all the way down to 2. So again, I think if you think about it, yes, from a manpower standpoint, we looked at less manpower, and those folks were essentially put in on.
I think. And
see a lot of basically progress. We had an accuracy rate of about 87%, which was very, very good. As compared to, just eyeballing stuff and then saying by gut that this is something that looks fraudulent. So I think that's something that I thought was really, really good and awesome, and I'm extremely proud of.
Yeah, love it. I love it. So Suresh, before we go to you, Vikram, one question from the audience was around that feature you explained. How did you explain that to management, why that would make sense?
Well, again, that was something that is results driven and also had some sort of a travel behavior characteristic to it. So we
Yeah.
did take some of these travel patterns and kind of showcased which had actuals in it and all that, and kind of showcased that there was a very high correlation for it.
Mhm.
But again, you wouldn't sometimes you accidentally stumble upon some of these features and you try to mathematically derive it to kind of make a feature out of it. And so those were one of the things is feature engineering becomes one of those key areas, avenues to really think through that. But yeah, this was it was not a feature. I would at the very beginning of when we started this analysis, there's nothing like that that came out in the data itself. It's just that you had to go and kind of build it out, and while doing some analysis, it just happened to stumble upon accidentally, and we built a feature around it, and which was successful at this point. And then we showed it with the data later on that there was a very high correlation of a pattern like this.
Mhm. Okay, thank you for that. Sumesh, did you have any favorite stories you wanted to share with the team?
No specific stories, Patrick. We are a bit early in our game in terms of we just recently kind of started launching AI ML. Our organization has been very much sales driven, very domain knowledge driven, and just now we are adopting AI ML. And what we are seeing some encouraging signs. For example, the high propensity customers, their win rates are 3x what we were observing. So overall win rates are higher by 20%. So I'm sure we will, have a number of good stories to tell in about a year's time.
Excellent. Well, I certainly want to thank you all for your contributions, your insight, and mostly your time. A lot of feedback in the chat, people saying they were very interesting. It was very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution. Really enjoyed our conversation. Could go on for quite a bit, but I'm watching the agenda, so we do need to move on. So thank you again. And